My name is Hannah Carter, and I will never forget the moment my own stepsister tried to humiliate me in front of an entire room full of strangers, only for everything to turn against her in the most unexpected way. It happened so fast that at first, I thought I imagined it, but the silence that followed made it clear that everyone had just witnessed the same thing. I am 34 years old and I work as a nurse. It is not a glamorous job, and it does not come with fancy titles or luxury perks, but it has always meant everything to me. Last month, I attended my stepsister Chloe's wedding dinner, not because we were close, but because I believed it was the right thing to do. I wore a simple navy dress, nothing expensive, nothing eye-catching, just something comfortable enough to get me through the evening without drawing attention. The venue was breathtaking, filled with soft golden lighting and elegant decorations that made everything feel like a scene from a movie. Crystal glasses sparkled under the lights, and white floral arrangements covered every table. Chloe stood at the center of it all in a stunning white gown, smiling as if the entire world revolved around her. That was always her way. She loved being admired, loved being the center of every conversation. We grew up under the same roof, but our lives could not have been more different. After my father passed away, my mother remarried Chloe's father, and from the outside, we became one family. But inside that house, there was always a quiet divide. Chloe had everything handed to her: private schools, designer clothes, and vacations in places I had only seen in magazines. I worked part-time jobs to get through college, eventually building a career in nursing through long nights and relentless effort. I never resented my path. In fact, I was proud of it. Being a nurse gave my life purpose. I had seen people at their weakest moments and helped them hold on just a little longer. But to Chloe, none of that mattered. In her world, success was measured in money, status, and appearances, and anything outside of that simply did not count. When I arrived at the reception, I quietly found a seat near the end of one of the long tables. A few relatives greeted me politely, but most people were too busy enjoying the celebration to notice. I was perfectly fine with that. I had no intention of being part of the spotlight. I was just there to show support and then leave without causing any disturbance. About 20 minutes into the dinner, as conversations filled the room and the sound of cutlery echoed softly, Chloe suddenly stood up and tapped her glass with a spoon. The ringing sound spread across the hall, gradually pulling everyone's attention toward her. She smiled brightly, clearly enjoying the moment, and announced that she wanted to introduce someone to her husband's family. Before I could even process what was happening, she turned her head and looked directly at me. I felt my chest tighten as dozens of eyes followed her gaze. She called my name and gestured for me to come forward. Refusing would have created an awkward scene, so I stood up and walked toward the main table, aware of every step I took. As soon as I reached her, she placed a hand on my shoulder and gave me a smile that I recognized instantly. It was the same smile she used growing up right before turning someone into the subject of a joke. She then looked at the groom's family and casually introduced me as her stepsister. For a brief moment, everything seemed normal, but then she let out a small laugh and added that I was just a nurse. A few people chuckled politely, and someone even made a quiet comment that sounded more like an attempt to fill the silence than genuine amusement. I felt the familiar sting of embarrassment rise inside me, but I kept my expression calm. I had learned long ago that reacting to Chloe only made things worse, so I simply smiled and said nothing. For a moment, it seemed like the situation would pass. Conversations slowly resumed, and people returned their attention to their meals. But then something unusual happened. The groom's father, a distinguished older man with sharp features and silver hair, suddenly stopped eating and began staring at me with intense focus. It was not a casual glance. It was the kind of look someone gives when they are trying to recall a distant memory. At first, I thought it was nothing, but his gaze did not shift. He placed his fork down slowly and leaned back in his chair, still watching me as if searching for something he could not quite grasp. His son noticed the change and asked if everything was all right, but the older man only nodded, his attention clearly somewhere else. Meanwhile, Chloe continued talking excitedly about honeymoon plans, completely unaware of the shift in energy at the table. Guests smiled and nodded, but there was a subtle tension building beneath the surface. The groom's father finally turned toward his son and quietly asked for my name again, repeating it slowly as if testing it against a memory. Chloe dismissed the moment with a laugh, making another remark about how I spent my life in hospitals. But this time, the laughter around the table felt forced. The older man did not react to her comment at all. Instead, he looked directly at me and politely asked if we had ever met before. I told him I was not sure, explaining that I met many people through my work. He nodded, but I could tell he was not convinced. There was something on the edge of his memory, something important that he could not fully reach. The music grew louder as the band began playing again, and guests started moving toward the dance floor, pulling attention away from the table. Chloe quickly joined them, eager to keep the celebration alive. Even as the evening continued, I noticed the groom's father glancing in my direction several times, his expression growing more certain each time. About 20 minutes later, when the music paused and guests returned to their seats, he came back to the table with a completely different look on his face. This time, there was no confusion, only recognition. He leaned forward slightly and said my name again, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Then he asked if I had been working at St. Mary's Hospital 3 years ago. The question made my heart skip, but I nodded and confirmed that I had. The entire table fell silent as he took a slow breath and began to speak. He explained that 3 years earlier, he had been involved in a severe car accident and was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. That night, the city had been in chaos due to a massive protest, and many doctors were delayed from reaching the hospital. For hours, he said, there had been only one nurse who stayed by his side, monitoring his condition, keeping him conscious, and refusing to leave even for a moment. As he spoke, he lifted his hand slightly and pointed toward me. He said that nurse was me. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Every person at the table turned to look at me, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock. He continued, his voice filled with gratitude, explaining that if I had not stayed with him, he might not have survived long enough for the doctors to arrive. His son looked at me in disbelief, then stood up and walked over, thanking me sincerely. I felt uncomfortable being the center of attention, so I simply told them I had only been doing my job. But the older man shook his head firmly and said it was much more than that. Then he turned toward Chloe, and the warmth in his expression disappeared. He calmly pointed out that she had introduced me as just a nurse, emphasizing that there was nothing just about someone who saves lives. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. For the first time that night, Chloe had nothing to say. Her confidence vanished, and she avoided looking at anyone directly. Around the table, people who had laughed earlier now looked embarrassed, some even shaking their heads in quiet disapproval. As the music resumed and the celebration continued, the atmosphere had completely changed. People spoke to me with a new sense of respect, and the earlier moment of humiliation faded into something far more powerful. Chloe remained unusually quiet for the rest of the evening, her presence no longer dominating the room. That night taught me something I will carry forever. Sometimes, the strongest response is silence, and the truth has a way of revealing itself when the time is right. You do not need to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. Eventually, life will do that for you, in ways you could never plan.